Hamel Time. All right, everybody. Well, thank you for tuning in. This is episode 3 of Stop Hamel Time. And today I have Brian Tomori of Brian Tomori Fine Arts. Say hi, Brian.
Hello. How's everybody doing today?
I hope everybody's doing good.
Well, I'm very happy to be here. So thank you for the invite. And this should be fun.
You're welcome. And I'm glad you can make it by. So I know you, we know each other through our Toastmasters group in St. Pete.
Yes.
That's
where we met.
When did you and your wife join Toastmasters?
We joined in February of 2018. And funny story, if you want me to share.
We all want you to share.
Exactly. I had wanted to join 20 years ago, and I'd actually looked up some local chapters. Yeah, 20 years ago.
Wow.
Just because I had heard, because it was something that I wanted to be better at.
Yeah.
And I knew I was going to continue to have, weekly opportunities to speak just based on business.
20 years ago? I didn't even know it existed 20 years ago.
It did.
Wow.
And I looked up actually I was working in Miami at the time, and I looked up some local chapters. I never followed through with signing up or going. I found out where the meetings were. I think somebody had recommended it to me at that point, and that's what got me doing the research. Mm-hmm. But Rachel, my wife, had heard 2 or 3 speakers through some of her bar events, the bar association, and she thought these people are great speakers. And so she asked, I think at least one of them or maybe 2 of them, how they became such a good speaker, because she has to do speaking engagements as well. And they said it was Toastmasters. So she asked me, she says, "Have you heard of Toastmasters?" I said, "Oh yeah." I said, "I've wanted to join that 20 years ago, but I never did." And she says, "These people were great speakers, and it was very natural." So she said, "Would you be interested in joining?" I said, "Absolutely. Look it up." And so she did some research. We came to the first meeting, met you and a couple other people, and that was the beginning.
Wow. So I do know that it existed. It's actually quite an old program since the 1940s, but 20 years ago, I didn't know it existed. It was fairly recent in my lifetime.
Yeah.
So the first time I heard about it, I just, I jumped in. But wow, so you've known about this for a while, and you were like, you know what, I need to get on this goddamn train.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is actually Dale Carnegie, which I think it might be pronounced Carnegie.
Yeah.
But
How to Win Friends and Influence Others.
When I was in high school, there was part of a leadership program where you were encouraged to sign up for a Dale Carnegie course as a high school student if you wanted to be a better public speaker. And I think that program was about leadership, and it was about the power of the spoken word and being able to captivate an audience and things of that nature. So my brother and sister, I believe, took those courses. I did not back then, but I remember that was probably, I've come to find out that was a equivalent to Toastmasters, or a different version. Yep. Which had the same principles.
Which is, it's still a good program.
Yeah.
So so we jumped right into some of the crazy stuff. Sure. But Brian, tell me a little bit about yourself. Let's talk about what you do. You're currently living in St. Pete with your wife.
Yes.
And you're CEO or owner of Brian Tomori Fine Arts.
Brian Tomori Fine Art.
Let's talk about it.
Well, I am an artist. I started...
What kind of artist?
I primarily I paint. I work in acrylic on canvas. Although, I've sketched. I've used all different mediums over my lifetime. But at a very young age, I could draw and paint very well. And as I got older, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life, and I had to start thinking about college. And the thought was, well, what can I do? What am I good at that I can enjoy and make money at? And so I thought maybe architecture, because that seemed to be a good profession, involved drawing and creating. And I didn't really think much of artwork as a fine art business. And I think that too is because even at a young age, we're kind of told, well, starving artist, nobody makes it as an artist.
Let's get a little context here to go back. Are you talking about in the 80s, the 90s, the 70s, 60s?
I'm talking
You're
about...
not 60s, right?
Not quite, almost. No, I'm talking back when I was in high school in the 80s, in the late 70s, early 80s. So,
Okay.
and so I thought, well, in high school, I won a couple state competitions and a congressional art competition when I was a senior. And I thought, well, maybe this is
In high
the
school?
path in high school.
Okay.
So I thought, well, there's a great college in Grand Rapids where I'm from. And I thought, well, that's probably the best bet for me because it's something I enjoy. And, there's different paths of creativity that you can follow as far as different majors.
Mm-hmm.
So I became an illustration major. And that led me on a path of creativity, working for ad agencies and working in the corporate world. And my plan at that time was, I remember this very distinctly. I had a boss who gave us a form. He said, I want you to fill out your goals for your career for the next 20 years, 25 years.
This is your boss?
My boss.
Okay.
Maybe he was prompted by HR, I don't know. But it forced us to think long term what we wanted out of our careers, even as entry-level artists at the time. And I thought, well, I want to be, creative director at a large ad agency. So I thought naturally that would probably be the highest level creative role I could be in my field.
Now, I just want to ask you really quick, because when you say, how old are you at this point?
I was 21 or 2.
21 or 22.
Yeah.
Now, he's asking you could be anything you want in the world.
Yeah.
And you said, and you thought it seemed like there was a business side of you as well as the artist side of you.
Yes.
And so you were trying to figure out how to take something you love and apply it to a business. Now, was it because you wanted to get into business, or would you say it was more because you thought that was the right thing to do in what was more expected from, say, if a parent asked you, a teacher asked you, a boss asked you, I got to apply it to somehow of a business position? I'm just curious.
Sure. There was, I guess, 2 trains of thought. One was that, just like owning a car or paying rent, there's a financial consideration for any career path. And the natural career path for me, based on my illustration and graphic design background, was to go into corporate creative world, either for a corporation or for an ad agency. So I was absolutely thinking of how can I best apply my skills and grow within an organization. Mm-hmm. And so there was absolutely a financial consideration there. But on the other train of thought, it was, what can I do that I really enjoy and be creative at in that role? So it was
and
dual.
Still make that car payment.
It was dual, but I think some artists are thinking, there's an interesting thought. Some artists are thinking, well, it's pure creativity, and don't worry about the money, and it's about expression, and that's great. But the reality of life is you have to have a place to live, and you are aspiring to grow, hopefully in some way, shape, or form, and you want the security that a job would afford you in art.
Okay.
So that was my thought process as I went through, was always thinking.
Now, can I just take that really quick? Because this is the way my mind's thinking right now. So this is how you're thinking when you're in your 20 to 21, let's say 20 to 24s,
Sure.
Right? That age range. And you're thinking, I have to have a career, I have to be able to pay for things, but at the same time, I want to do my art. And so this is how I can make a career. Now, are you in your late 40s, early 50s?
Right now?
Yeah.
I'm in my mid-50s.
Okay. But it seems, and maybe I'm wrong, so maybe you can walk us through this, but it seems like you took a bigger risk, a bigger leap of faith doing what you're doing now, because there's no guarantee that a painting artist or any kind of an artist, unless they get a contract, right? Because you kind of started this out from your own. You didn't already have somebody say, you know what, Brian, I'm going to guarantee you $100,000 every year. And so it seems like a different mindset.
Sure.
Like now, I don't know if, talk to us.
Sure.
You didn't go into this obviously with guaranteed money,
no,
like you would a normal job.
No.
So that's what I'd like to hear.
Well, the in-between time from that, when I filled out that questionnaire, I was able, fortunately, to work my way through a variety of very large companies and execute creative direction or support at a high level. Mm-hmm. And it was lucrative, it paid well. My plan was always, and this is going back 20 some years, was always to get back into a fine art role where I'm just painting, where it is pure expression. Wow. The tactile nature of holding a brush and dipping it in paint and putting it on canvas is wonderful. It's meditative, it's therapeutic, it's creative, it's very, it's part of my DNA.
It's you.
Yeah, it's me. So
I love it.
Even though I was working in corporate, and there were some amazing brands and companies I worked for and some amazing people.
Who are some of those brands that you've worked for?
I worked for Kenneth Cole in New York in their corporate office as Vice President of Creative Services.
Out of New York?
Out of New York,
wow.
Yeah. And I was at Perry Ellis International for 8 years as first Director of Advertising Graphics and then Vice President of Creative Services for them. And I was directing photo shoots. And some of the brands under Perry Ellis International, it's not just that brand. They designed all Callaway golf apparel, PGA Tour, mm-hmm. Janssen swimwear, Nike swimwear.
So a lot of luxury and athletic
original
brands.
Penguin, yeah. They were a $1 billion company. They still are, and they have continued to acquire brands and rebrand them, market them into a variety of channels of distribution. So those days were fun and amazing, stressful. They had their share of pros and cons, but generally speaking, that was still a great, enjoyable form of creativity, different than actually, painting and creating with my own hands.
Not the brush in your hand, but still being creative.
Yes.
and to...
My goal was to always get back to fine art at the right point in time. And that right point in time, I always thought was after my career in corporate creative fashion advertising, reached a point where, I could move on and make a transition into the art. Mm-hmm. So that's always been my long-term goal. And just about a year and a half ago, just under 2 years, I started full-time as a fine artist. So yes, there is no guarantees. It was...
So 2016?
2016, yeah, at the end of 2016, November, I started, and I knew it was going to take about a year to get enough content to have a show. Mm-hmm. And I had studied the market for a long time, and I had actually sought out talented artists, and I said, give me some advice. This is 10 years prior. I said, I'm going to be a fine artist at some point. What advice would you give me? And I got some great advice along by asking people. Mm-hmm. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but there came a point where I was done with creative on a corporate level, and I said, well, maybe I should go back to New York and get a job there. But she and I had just gotten together in her law practice is here. And she's like, do the fine art. You've always talked about it since I've known you. You've planned on it. You've shared all these thoughts about how it could be. She goes, now's the time.
Was that in Miami? Because I know you spent some time in Miami, and now you're in St. Pete. Okay.
The next step will be to take advantage of my contacts in New York and get some exhibit space up there, which we're in the process of working on right now. I've got a couple locations that I'm probably going to have some art in about 2 months.
So let me ask you, you have to invest a year. You don't know if your art's going to sell. So you are going to, you've quit your other job before this, yeah. Right? So you have no job. You have no income other than money that's saved, your spouse, your wife coming in, and you know that you have to take a year off to make art. Mm-hmm. Did you do another job? Did you focus solely on creating art? Did you guys make a choice to make this investment? Tell me about that first year.
The first year, I kept Tomori Creative. I started Tomori Creative Group also, which I figured the years of experience I had accumulated, mm-hmm. I still have a lot of knowledge, and I could still apply that knowledge to a variety of companies. So I actually have done some consulting. I've done some trend presentations. Probably 3 months ago or 4 months ago, I did a trend presentation to Target, to Target management for some upcoming trends for 2020. And I've got some more going. So I was doing some consulting work locally.
Okay.
And that helped supplement. I needed to pay for my art supplies and things of that nature.
Right.
Yeah, and I sold when I did the show. Actually during the first year, I had some money saved. And so I used the resources I had to buy canvases. And the funny thing is, the first painting that I wanted to do when I started on my own, I had a sketch of a samurai that when I moved to St. Pete, actually from New York, in 2013, the first week I moved here, I bought a canvas that was 12 by 12 feet. It was a piece of canvas cloth, linen.
It's pretty big.
It is big. And I had the sketch completed for this samurai, and I said, the first piece I paint when I go on my own is going to be this 10 by 12 foot samurai painting.
Jeez.
And
that's big.
It's big. And I figured, if I'm going to do it big. And so I had kept that canvas folded up in storage, and I hadn't done anything with it until 2016. So when I said, well, this is it, going to do it, the first thing I did is I gessoed that canvas up and started that painting, and that was the showcase piece for my first show the following May. To your earlier question, I did not know what was going to sell, but I have a belief in my abilities, and I knew.
And your wife obviously has a belief in you too.
Yeah, she does.
Helps.
She's a lawyer, but she's also very creative, and she was an artist when she was younger. And
that
she's
helps.
a writer. Yeah,
I never knew that about her.
Yeah, she's got a very creative side to her. She's as she says, she's my business partner, my lawyer, and also my wife, which is a great combination.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But she was supportive, and she knew that it would take time. And having the show in May, less than a year after I had gone on my own, was huge. I had the big piece done, had some other pieces. I sold some at the show. So it's been a journey, but it was definitely, I would say there's a fear factor involved, just from the standpoint that, like any business, art is a business too. And like any business, you have to start off, pay your dues, do your homework, make your phone calls.
Yeah.
So I think that in my background in selling ideas, selling stories through campaigns for other brands, I'm my own brand. So, that I think is helpful and gives me, I don't know if it's an edge, but it gives me another dimension to pitch my ideas when I'm talking to a potential client about a commission piece, or coming up even with the concept for a show. It's all storytelling. You're looking at what you want to put on canvas as an idea. I'm half Japanese. I wanted to do Japanese subject matter. Samurai and geisha have always fascinated me. And all of the things that go into their equipment and their clothing and things of that nature always fascinated me. So I wanted to build a show around that, and that was my first show. It was called Dichotomy, but it was primarily Japanese contemporary artwork that was done in what I call a Neo-Edo style.
Neo-Edo.
Yes, Edo period is a period in Japanese history, 1630 to 1860, or somewhere in that range. And it was this period where art was done, a lot of woodblock prints, but there's a very stylized interpretation of the face. It's elongated. The art was typically flat. And
was there a lot of exaggeration in features, like eyes and hair?
Yes, and there were some influences from Japanese theater, with some of the makeup and things of that nature.
Is that like kabuki?
A little bit of kabuki, yes.
I didn't know if I was pronouncing that correctly.
That's correct. So I call my artwork Neo-Edo on the Japanese side, because it's new interpretation of Edo period styles.
Yeah.
So I put my twist on that. But that too, that's part of a story. It's something I wanted to do, but I want to be able to explain to any potential buyers, this is influenced by the Edo period. My stylization is similar but different. I have my own twist.
You have your personality, right? Your form of expression, how I want to portray it.
Yeah.
Do you like it? If you do,
exactly,
it's for sale.
And that show is called Dichotomy because when I was in New York and Miami, I was also influenced, completely different animal, but industrial pop surrealism. Pop surrealism, or industrial pop, is a fairly new genre of art. It came out in the early 90s, originated more so in California, but it was artwork that was influenced by street art, comic book art, anime, car art to a degree.
Which is amazing, by the way.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
All different influences. And it was a little bit of a counterculture influence. Some call it lowbrow art. Mm-hmm. But there's a genre, and there's a magazine called Juxtapose that came out in the early 90s. And now there's another one called High Fructose that specialize in showing the works of pop surrealists. My city influence, working in New York, which I love, and even spending time in Miami, had me explore a lot of urban textures and subject matter. And I was working with, since there's a pulp novel influence with that art too, from 50s and 60s and early 70s of pulp fiction and pulp novels. And so I did a group of art that was part of the show that was completely different from the Japanese contemporary, but it was something that I wanted to explore. And then I had the Japanese contemporary side, which was part of my heritage and something I felt very passionate about too. So I called the show Dichotomy because it was really two divergent thought processes in one show. And it went off, I think, very well. So I still am exhibiting both, and I'm going to continue to create both, which might not be a stereotypical approach to artist works. Usually if you have a style, you stick with that style.
Right.
But for me, I think exploring and painting what I want to paint is as important. It doesn't have to be one or the other. I think it can be both.
When you say you commission work, you do commission work.
Yes.
What is the difference between commission work and then, say, a painting like you want to do the 10 by 12 of the Samurai Warrior? What is the difference between the two? How does somebody commission you?
Yeah, I've had a couple people approach me and say, I want you to do a piece. They had a piece I did recently for somebody who walked into the gallery, saw my work, loved it, and he came back maybe a month later and said, my dad just passed away a few months ago, and I love your style of your pop work, and I want to do a portrait of him, but not a traditional portrait. Here's his military photo when he was in his Marine dress uniform, and I want you to incorporate other elements into the background that are meaningful to me about my family. So I did a commission piece based on that input.
Wow.
And that was a great piece to do, and I enjoyed it, and it was something I would not normally have done. So I think, like any artist, painting and expressing an idea, whether it comes from somebody else and something they want you to execute, or it's your own work that you want to do, I think it's healthy to take on commission work, and it forces you to think differently, and I think it makes you a better artist ultimately, because you're just approaching it differently and creating a different form of expression that pleases somebody else, and it's based on some preconceptions they have.
How do you come up with pricing for that, Brian? How do you say, this is how much it's going to cost? Because obviously you don't look it up on the internet and say, oh, well, if it's going to be a 10 by 12, this should take me about 7 hours to coming from your advertising background and all the others. Like, this has got to be a different way of pricing for you.
It is. There's a strategy and a philosophy behind. I've got a good story to share about the pricing aspect. Art is very subjective, and I think a lot of people don't truly understand the value of good art. And the digital world has also influenced the cost of art. It's so inexpensive now. Anybody can own a very high-end archival quality ink printer that can produce prints of anything that they download off the internet. So art pricing has gone down just by the advent of technology and all the changes that have happened. But the intrinsic value of art is always something that is, it is a science of sorts. There are some people formulas that go by the square inch, and it might be X dollars per inch based on complexity of piece, based on the how well known the artist is and any established works that they've done.
It's almost like basically their brand.
Yes. And, some people have built a very great reputation and they can command a higher cost per piece.
Who's the one really crazy guy? Is it Banksy?
Banksy does a great job. He was more of a street artist is a street artist that does clever art installations and graffiti and stencil art in major cities.
But he's got a brand.
He's got a brand. Yeah. And
he's also the one that shredded the picture, right? Was that the one that shredded? It was the girl in the balloon.
And
it was like at like a Sotheby's auction or like one of the big auctions, and they auctioned it off, and it started to shred.
I heard something about that.
That's crazy.
I didn't hear that full story. I heard the tail end of that, so I don't know the full story behind that one. But there was an artist that one of my art directors came across. We were trying to do a hang tag for a Latin brand. And a hang tag on clothing, apparel.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think it was for Macy's. And we were revising the brand, and he came across a piece of artwork, a painting of a couple dancing, and it was very artistic and painterly and a lot of brush strokes. And he said, this is a perfect image that exemplifies the brand. So we did a little research, and I got a hold of the guy, and I said, hey, listen, we want to buy the rights to your artwork. This is the usage. We negotiated a price. And once the deal was done, he said, yeah, no problem. And I told him at that time, I said, I'm going to have a fine art career at some point. What advice would you give me? And he said, well, relative to pricing. This is a guy, he was up in, I think, Boston. And he said, well, this is the advice I give you. He said, I create about 20 pieces a year. They're all 3 by 4 feet. They're all dancers for the most part. Mm-hmm. And I sell them for $20,000 to $25,000 each. And I said, well, how many do you sell? And he says, I sell all of them every year. And I did the math on that, and I thought, this guy's making a good living. And he says, I also have a licensing deal.
How much a piece?
$25,000.
A piece?
Times 20.
A piece?
A piece. Original art. And he said, I also have a licensing deal with a company that does posters and prints. He says, I'm not going to share that information with you. And he says, I also teach as an adjunct professor at a local college. So I'm thinking, this guy has got the life. He's painting full time.
Doing what he loves.
He's got his formula.
Making a shit ton of money.
Dancer, making money. And he said, the paintings I'm doing now, virtually the exact same things. When I first started, I was selling them for $700, $900, $1,000. He says, I couldn't sell any of them. He says, my skill level is the same as it was then. I mean, he's a little bit better, but he said, the advice I give to you is whatever you do, establish your art value high enough so that you're not trying to dig yourself out of a hole for your career.
Wow.
He said, because I was trying to sell my works for $700, $900, and $1,000. He said, one day I decided to multiply that by 10, and I took the same paintings that couldn't sell for $700, and I put a $7,000 price tag on them. He said it sold within a week. And he said all his pieces sold, the pieces he couldn't sell for 10 times less. And he said for him, the biggest lesson he learned is that whatever you do to establish your pricing at the beginning lives with you. And the perception of value associated with how you price your artwork. Now, assuming that you're a talented artist and it's not, crap. But he said that would be the advice. He said, know your value based on your quality level and start where you should be, not where you think people will spend the money. He said, because a couple might walk in and they could have a good joint household income, but $400 or $500 is like the maximum they would ever spend on an original piece of art for their living room.
Right.
And that would be a lot of money for them, even though they might have a good net worth. And he said, once you get into a different buying class, $10,000 might be the low end of an institutional art buyer or a art collector or a commercial buyer.
Yeah.
So he put himself in a different range, and he said most artists just undervalue their art. So I took that to heart, and I thought, I'm going to price where I think I should be. So the thing I learned is that there's definitely a psychology to buying, and you want to put yourself in a position to be at the right price based on your quality level, but you have to get yourself in front of the right audience, and that takes a little bit of time.
Talk to me about what somebody may say to you, because right now we're talking about art like it's a business. And you did come from a business, like an artistic business background. What about people who say, you know, you're doing your art based on how much you can get per piece. Like, that doesn't make you an artist. That makes you a salesman. That makes you a creator of a product. That makes you a marketer trying to create a brand. You know, and I'm not saying this. I'm just saying that could be perceived how some people look at it. Just me asking, like, how do you price? And some artists may say, you know, that's not art. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
But you know what?
That's a great question. There are probably...
Do you ever have any internal struggle with that?
There are probably a lot of artists that say that might cringe at my approach. Creativity is creativity. You know, you know, based on what you see. You know, say you have an independent filmmaker.
Yeah.
And there are great independent filmmakers, and there are garbage.
Yeah.
Just because you have a camera does not make you a videographer. Just because you have a camera does not make you a photographer.
Just because you have a car doesn't mean you make you a NASCAR racer.
Exactly. People, you know, when it comes to creative things, art in this case, there is absolutely a reason somebody is going to like something visually and want to own it, want to look at it every day. And so from a pure creative standpoint, I want to create art that makes people happy, that they get some emotional response, they have some emotional response to, that makes them want to purchase it. So it's I'm creating, and obviously I'm selling, but you're selling hopefully, you know, joy or, you know, something of value to that person. Now, how much? What's the price for that? You know, that's the business side of it. But I don't create to sell. I create ideas that I want to put on canvas that I think that make me happy, and I think will probably make somebody else happy. So now,
because you have a marketing background, and obviously I have a marketing background. I have a marketing company. But, you know, I look at what you do. I want to get your opinion and not push what I thought.
Sure.
I believe that you're doing it the right way. And so I do believe art is very subjective. And so it's, you know, whether you're doing movies, whether you're doing music, whether you're doing video games, it's all art.
Yes.
It's created. A book. Right?
Everything.
If you write a story, Stephen King, he's an artist.
Yes.
I love the definition of artist. What an artist is. And I feel that if you're going to create something that's unique, you're putting something out into the world that nobody else is going to put out. So when you do what do you call it, the neo-Edo? Okay.
Yes.
Whether you've created that term, that genre, it doesn't matter, because whatever somebody else could paint in a neo-Edo as well, but they're not going to paint the samurai the same way you do.
Sure.
And so I would imagine that somebody sees something and you've painted one of it. And let's say you're like, I'm not going to reproduce this. My 12 by 10, right? Is that what it is, the samurai?
It ended up being about 9 by 8 feet.
9 by 8.
The canvas was 12 by 10, but the finished piece was 9
So we have
by
a 9 by 8, which is still goddamn large.
It's big.
I mean, it's my whole wall.
Yeah.
You're not going to recreate that. Let's say you're not going to do a print. That's it. You've put one, and I'm not saying you are or whatever, but let's just say that's the one piece you're putting out.
Yes.
Somebody, if they want that, you're like, I can either keep that in my house or you can buy it. And what's it worth to you? And I think that's what some people don't understand. Like when they go to Sotheby's or something, they're like, how can that sell for $500,000? Well, somebody who can afford that for $500,000 doesn't give a shit about $500,000, or they do, but they just look at, say, maybe your samurai artwork and they're like, I want that. And if that's the only one in the world, that's one of a kind, I want it.
Yeah. Well, the funny story is, since you use that as an example, I did actually sell a print at size, 9 by 8 feet. Somebody wanted a reproduction. I've done one reproduction of that. And
how long does that take you?
Well, that piece took 4 months to create, just as a piece of art.
9 by 8.
But yeah, but Jeez. But I did have somebody that has a place, and it was a good customer. He's a good customer, and he's a friend of mine. And he said, I have a new home that I'm building, and it's got a Japanese theme to it, and I would love to have this piece on my wall up there, but I visit the place only a handful of times over the year, and I'm not going to buy the original for a place that I only visit once in a while. Yeah. And so he wanted a reproduction, which I happily sold. I had one reproduction made to size for that piece, which is a pretty big piece to have reproduced. It had to be done in two panels.
Yeah.
And so I did sell a reproduction. But the point is, it wasn't at the same price as the original. Mm-hmm. And there are some artists that say I would never reproduce a piece of art. I think some people say that's a sellout, or you want to only have original works out there. You don't want to produce even one reproduction. Most artists will do a limited run of artist proofs or giclées that, in some cases, like I will hand embellish some of the pieces of reproduction if I sell one. So there's that too. It's based on the artist. If you want to offer reproductions, it's a more affordable way to get your artwork in front of more people. Mm-hmm. And
so when you say a reproduction, are you creating an original piece of art, say on a 3x4, and when you reproduce it, are you painting another one, or are you taking the picture, digitizing it, and then selling it that way?
High-end digital photography by somebody who does art photography. And
so it's not the original. It's not on canvas. Original. It's not by paint.
No, it's on canvas. It's on the same grade canvas that you would paint on. It's done with archival inks, which are guaranteed for 100 years. They can apply a spot or a varnished finish the same way that you hand varnish a canvas.
Really?
For reproduction. And some people, to a trained eye, you would say, oh, that's a reproduction. I've seen reproductions where I've had to walk up to it, look at it from the side, and see if it catches the light, and where I couldn't tell if it was an original or a reproduction.
Like you've had to really scrutinize it and say, wow, they've gotten that good.
Yes. And it depends on, my style. I tend to, for the industrial stuff, I tend to have it be a smoother style. So it's right on the canvas. It's a very smooth finish. Mm-hmm. For the Japanese artwork, I use a lot of heavy textures, and there's a lot of, if you look at one of my original Japanese pieces, you see all kinds of brush strokes and globs of ink and things that I want to create a very dynamic surface interest to the canvas, because I think that's part of the beauty of that painting. It's this beautiful, creation that has all kinds of surface texture to it.
Yeah.
So those are easier to tell, but the quality of production, if you go to the right person, somebody's buying a beautiful reproduction that, for all intents and purposes, a lot of people would just say that's a beautiful piece of art. Is it an original?
Or you're right. Like you said, if it's you almost have to be a very, very trained eye,
depending on the style of art,
to tell the difference and say, I can't even tell if that's an original or not.
Yes.
What to you is the definition of an artist?
An artist.
And I don't want you to think in the
painting. Or
I don't want you to think in the acrylic world. I want you to just, what is the definition of an artist? Like Prince was an artist.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say,
and I mean from yours. I don't care what Webster's is or whatever.
No, I would say an artist is somebody who's creating something, whether it's sound or something physical, something that is aesthetically pleasing or evokes emotion. It doesn't have to be. Some things are scary or horrifying, and they're fascinating. But I would say when you're creating something that connects with a viewer, that creates an emotional response, that's an artist. Anything, like I said, it could be sound, it could be a painting, it could be a book. If you can connect on an emotional level with somebody, that strikes a chord in them in some way, shape, or form, and that's why art is so different. It's subjective based on the viewer's perspective. Mm-hmm. that is an artist creating something that evokes an emotional response in the viewer.
God, I love how you just walked that down.
Yeah,
because that's exactly you're saying it, and I'm like,
yeah.
It's somebody who creates something that evokes an emotional response.
Yes.
And you literally just walked yourself down to that talking. I love that.
Well, it's a good question. I guess I've never really thought of it, to cull it down into something, into a sentence. There's a concept that I'm working on now that I've always been fascinated by Alice in Wonderland, for instance. And I had a opportunity to put a proposal together for a yet to be named enterprise that wants an art installation. And they said they were already talking to some other people and they wanted a concept. And so, if you go to my Instagram site,
what's your Instagram handle?
Shameless plug is at Brian Tomori Fine Art. There were some sketches I worked up based on discussing how this place was set up. I wanted to do a concept called Geisha in Wonderland, and I was fascinated by Alice in Wonderland.
Geisha in Wonderland.
And it's a play off Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, or Through the Looking Glass, and it combined this surreal landscape, but with Japanese subject matter. And Alice is a geisha in this interpretation, and the Cheshire cat is a lucky cat, which is a very iconic Japanese symbol of that. You see the cat with the one paw up, and it's a very iconic Japanese symbol. So the Cheshire cat would be a lucky cat. The Tweedledee and Tweedledum are two sumo wrestler brothers, Dim Sum and Dum Sum. So they're they've got the same characteristics as the original Carol characters, but they're the Japanese interpretation.
Yeah.
And she's running through a bamboo forest of giant bamboo trees and plants. The concept of drink me, eat me, there's a bottle that makes her smaller or larger if she drinks it, and there's a cake that she eats. It would be like a rice cake, and it might be sake or something to that effect. But
and the Queen of Hearts,
exactly, the Queen of Hearts. You've got the Queen; she would be a empress, and you've got the the cards that she said off with her head. And those are samurai. They've got the samurai cards, and they've got the samurai sword instead of the axe.
Yeah, and then there's the other two major icons, the Mad Hatter. And
the Mad Hatter would be a koi fish, and I've sketched all these out.
Oh,
the Mad Hatter is a koi fish.
What is this waiting for?
He's walking on chopsticks. Literally, we've had 3 meetings, and I'll have an answer tomorrow.
And who's we?
We as in me and my business partner,
the wife,
Rachel, and my art broker. So we're working with a company now to execute this, and they said they said that they've
this
entertained,
is awesome.
And so it's Geisha in Wonderland. It would be. I said this would be your concept
can you do that legally?
Yeah. It's an interpretation. It's.
I don't even know what you're waiting for.
Yeah. Well, it's already sketched, and it's kind of the concept is fully well thought out. But
Geisha in Wonderland. But Brian Tomori Fine Arts.
Whether they go with
coming
it or not,
soon.
Although I think they will. It would be an art show would be built around that, and the thing, and the caterpillar would be instead of a hookah smoking caterpillar, it's a hookah smoking dragon, a Japanese dragon. So
Brian, this needs to happen.
It's going to happen. So whether it flies with the people I'm talking with right now,
I'll talk to your business partner tomorrow.
Exactly. But that's kind of the point. It's so much fun, and it's taking an idea, and it's an adaptation of a previous idea, but it's fun, it's compelling. Mm-hmm. It has legs. It's visually interesting. Yeah, I had fun, working on it and conceiving it. So I shared the idea with the company. They loved it, and we're just negotiating some things with price, and hopefully it happens. But if it doesn't happen with them, it's going to happen just as a concept for a show.
Yeah. Now speaking of your art, I don't know if I can afford an original, but I've been thinking of changing out some of this background, and I know that car would look really
Oh,
good
yeah.
right about there.
I'm having some prints produced of that soon. So, yeah, you'll be the first I call.
Have you and your business partner, aka your wife,
Yes.
have you guys ever talked about you doing the consulting business full time and then you painting without worrying about paying the bills with your painting on the side? Was that ever a part of the discussion?
That was part of it, yeah. I mean, I've looked at it from a bunch of different ways. Because it's a transition,
Mm-hmm.
I thought, well, maybe I work part-time while I get it off and running. And there was a thought process of, no, just jump in. And we've gone back and forth on the business of this business of fine art and what makes the most sense.
Right.
And so it changes sometimes, if there's a big outlay of money to participate in a show, it's like, is this worth it? I mean, you don't want to spend all this money if you're not going to get a sale at venue A, B, or C. How much does a show cost to produce? How much does it cost to promote it?
Yeah.
There's a lot of considerations in that. And, ideally, I am a self-sufficient artist that isn't relying on my partner, my life partner, wife, and business partner.
Yeah.
But, there's, you have to. And so, yeah, there's a lot of considerations on, what makes sense and what is going to, how do you manage consulting and doing the fine art and managing your time. The beauty of it is to say I'm an artist and I'm able to paint every day doing and enjoy doing what I do. I mean, that's priceless.
Mm-hmm.
So, there is a wonderful aspect to the struggles of being an artist.
Let me throw out something in that, and I'm going to ask you one final question here. So other than the fact that one of your pieces would look good here, once I go from one viewer per episode
Mm-hmm.
to like hundreds,
Sure.
possibly even thousands at some point, thanks to the internet.
Exactly.
And you get really famous after you do your Edo and Wonderland, is it?
Geisha and Wonderland.
Geisha and Wonderland, Edo style, which is going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
I can't wait to your art. Who is it? Your art. What do you call the guy? He's your
Art broker.
Your broker and your business partner tomorrow agree for you to do this because it's going to be just bonkers and it's going to be fantastic, and you're going to get really famous from that. By the way, for anybody who's say in their late teens. Or in their early 20s, and they're thinking about going to art school and they're not very sure of themselves, what's the best piece of advice you can give to somebody who just, that confidence is low, they're not sure, they're taking to heart what some of these haters who have easy access to the internet just as much as the positive people, what would you say to somebody who says, Brian, you're really popular, you're really good, I suck, I'm horrible, nobody likes my shit. What do I'm just done, Brian. Yeah. I'm not even going to bother. Well, how do you respond to that?
There are people who always tell somebody who's artistic, you will never be able to do this.
You're going to fail. Nobody's going to like you.
I will tell you that 90% of the world will be against them going to art as a career. They might say it. They might say, oh, this is great, you're talented, oh, you're so good. In their minds, I guarantee you, and this is from personal experience, I'm not saying we don't all have supporters, family and friends, we do, but most people look at art as a career path and think, this is a bad decision. It's not. It's what you make it. And
or they don't even think it's a career path. They're like, that's not real.
And the thing about art, if somebody wants to be an artist or wants to be successful in the world of art, there are so many paths that you can take that might not immediately be evident to you. Whether you're a fine artist or a graphic designer or a digital artist or whatever, and if they're running into that situation where they're being told, I can't do it, and people hating on them or whatever, keep doing it, because you have to recognize the opportunities will be there. You have to recognize them when they show up, And I know, some artists who became set designers and were phenomenally successful and happy as an artist doing set design, because it took their ability as an artist and creativity and the creative thought process and applied it in a different medium, but it was still art.
Right.
I know some artists who have become great fashion designers. I know a lot of
still great outlets.
They're
what you're
great
saying,
outlets
right?
for creativity. So, but if it was just painting and drawing, there's a market for everybody. I would say, do your homework, find your audience. It might not be in your own backyard. You might need to move. One of the biggest things that was
or at the internet, you can reach out to just about anybody.
Exactly. There is an audience for somebody, and their style might not be mainstream. That's okay. I would just say continue to pursue your passion. Remain as fearless as possible. Block out the noise and criticism that you will hear. Mm-hmm. And just follow, you had used the term earlier, follow your gut. 90% of the time, your first instinct, your gut, will tell you the right answer. It will give you the answer that you're looking for, and that's at a guttural, instinctive level. Mm-hmm. Follow that, because that's probably going to lead you down the true path. So I would say keep at it. Don't. It sounds cliche, but don't quit. Just follow your passion. Don't quit. Don't listen to the critics, and you will find your happiness in your way.
It's interesting. Are you familiar with Seth Godin, marketing? He writes a lot of books.
I'm not.
He's basically credited with creating email marketing, but not the bullshit that it's turned into. Now that marketers have completely screwed up. And advertisers, but one of his beliefs is that there's no such thing as writer's block. He's like, basically it's people who just don't want to write. He goes, because if you got writer's block because you think what you're about to write is going to be crap, he's like, just keep writing.
Yes.
He's like, you're going to write shit. He's like, you're going to write good stuff. Just write. Yeah. You work through it.
Yeah, that's the same principle as the painting. Just if you keep painting, you will have the breakthrough, or you'll get it to the point where you like it.
Not every stroke you do is a masterpiece, is what you're saying?
No. I never... the live painting is fairly new to me over the past couple of years. When I was doing a little bit of painting when I was in New York, and I did a couple pieces that were larger pieces just for my apartment. And I remember I did not want to show anybody anything that was in progress, because it looks terrible it does. It looks, when you're blocking in color and nothing's modeled or rendered, and it's chunky and unrefined. It's nothing that you really want to show anybody. It's like baking a cake, It's like you don't want it.
You can taste the flour, but it's not very good
until
you start putting some eggs and everything into it.
But so yeah, it is a refinement process. But as I've gotten more comfortable and more, I guess, fearless about how my approach to painting, it's like I don't care about that. I know in my mind, and maybe my sketch, I know in my mind how it's going to be. So, people can watch if they want to in progress, and that's fine. And some people might say, "What's that? It looks terrible." I know how it's going to end up, and I might have to keep working on it and refining it, but it'll come out great in the end.
Yeah.
So,
well, Brian, I want to thank you very much for coming, and I want to know where can I myself and where can everybody else find you? What social networks are you on?
Sure.
Do you have a website? Where can we find out more about the works that you're doing?
I will have a website shortly. There's one in progress, but in the meantime, Instagram at Brian Tomori Fine Art is probably the best way to see my most current work, what I'm working on, where I'm at. Brian Tomori Fine Art Facebook page. I have a business page that also usually will give you some insight and background and things I'm working on. That's where you'd see my work right now.
So on Instagram, it's Brian Tomori, BrianTomori.
Yes.
And then Fine Art, not arts.
Yes,
just Fine Art. And it's the same thing on Facebook.
Yes, and if you Googled, if you did a Google image search and just said Tomori Art or Tomori painting or anything like that, it would populate with most of my
And
works.
you
just
have pictures
organically.
you have pictures of your works up online?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I didn't quite get into it. Maybe we'll save this for another time. But you did say that you're half Japanese, correct?
Yes.
Is that your mother's side or your
Yes,
father's
my
side?
mother's side. Yeah, she's from Okinawa.
From Okinawa.
Yes.
You know who else is from Okinawa?
I don't.
Miyagi from Karate Kid. So you got some roots there. You got some.
That's true. That's true.
Well, Brian, I want to say thank you so much for coming. It was great having a conversation with you and learning a lot more about you. And here's the interesting thing. we're in Toastmasters together. We see each other at least 3 times a month, but I just never knew this much about you. It's been great getting to know you and really appreciate you sharing all your thoughts as far as art, as far as life, and just in general with us. So I really, really appreciate you for coming by.
Well, thank you for having me. I hope it's interesting for people to listen to, but I had a lot of fun. So thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
And I think we should do it again sometime. What do you think?
I would love to. Have me back anytime.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming by. And that's it for episode 3 of Stop Hamel Time.